Hi guys, it's Professor Fernandez and I am doing a video here to show you a little bit of what I'm looking for this journal here. Journals, how I do them in 1302 are a little bit different than probably what you've done in the past. They are indeed a little bit more involved. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I want to make sure that you understand what's going on. So one of the things you want to do is definitely read the assignment sheet and make sure that you have everything that you need for the assignment sheet. You will absolutely, positively need to do some research and find an article, a news article that goes with the piece. And how you would do that is that you would actually go through the rhetorical situation, find the topic, maybe find the argument that the piece you're reading is making, and then find a news article that kind of substantiates that argument or that piece. So that's how you should go about it. And remember, you're going to want to do something that's only found in the databases. So don't Google search it at all. I will be able to tell. And you're definitely going to want nothing older than a year. So nothing older than, we're recording this in September right now. So nothing older than September 2019 is what you need. And of course, if you're listening to this beyond September 2020, go 1 year, subtract a year, and then that's what you have. All right, let's get started. One of the things that you definitely want to see and make sure that you have in this wonderful paper is a really great headline, or sorry, not headline, but header. The issue here is that this is literally like a little mini paper. I'm not going to call it a paper. It's a mini paper. So you're definitely going to want to do your heading here. And your heading this is the correct way to do it. You're going to put your name, first name, last name, your professor's name, and my name is Professor Fernandez. Do not use my first name. I will automatically count points off for that. You're also going to want to put what your class is. I know that it's 1302, but if I've asked you to put your last 4 digits of your class number there for whatever reason, please do so. And of course, write down your date. MLA states that you should do day, month, year. I really don't care. I just don't want slashes. All right. So don't say in this, for example, let's use October 4th as an example, to put 10/4/20. Let's just write it out. Okay. And that would be fine. If you were in this case, want to abbreviate October, I would not be mad at that either. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's do it correctly. So a lot of people think that I start really reading here and I start kind of grading here, which is not the case. I actually start grading here at the title. So the title of your journal is not the title of the piece that you are commenting on. It is not journal 1, journal 2. It is not nonfiction journal, poetry journal, fiction journal. I start grading from the title. So give it a title. My tip is to not write the title until the end. After you're done writing what you're going to write, then give it a really good title. Okay. So let's get started. This is actually a really good journal. This particular student, she did some things really well and some things that I wish she would have done more of. So I want to go ahead and point out some things, and you'll have a copy of this in your D2L so you can refer to it as well. Let's start with the introduction here. I have grown up with the idea that a woman should stay at home and take care of their spouse along with their family. Growing up in a Hispanic household, I was surrounded by women who believed in the same idea that they still to this day believe in that way. Now, as a 19-year-old, I have seen throughout this year's women have risen and claimed their independency and equality. All right, so let's talk about here. There's a couple of grammar stuff here. And again, I'm really talking about structure and putting the essay together. I'm not talking about grammar or usage or mechanics here. Obviously, you're going to find some grammar and mechanics usage issues in this paper. But what I'm really here, especially for this video, is to talk about how this particular student put her stuff together. She did it really, really well, enough so that I'm using this as an example of how to put this together. Also, I'm not a big fan of like extremely perfect examples because I think that's sometimes unattainable. So it's just like you need to see people mess up, and people do mess up. And so here she actually did mess up, especially these two sentences, which is interesting. So for this, I actually am going to say you should probably reread some things out loud. Let's continue. In Hills Like White Elephants, written by Ernest Hemingway, and She's 19 and Lives with Her Mother, Meet the Feminist Teenager Running for Office in Argentina by Maria Sanchez Diaz, the topic of feminism and masculinity is present in both pieces in different but similar ways. Okay, so let's talk about this particular thesis. It's not a bad thesis. It really, really isn't. It's doing some really good things. Okay, let's talk about what it's doing well. It is writing the name of the pieces she's going to talk about right here at the beginning. So we know that she's going to talk about the story Hills Like White Elephants, and she has written the title correctly because she has written it in quotation marks. She said it was written by Ernest Hemingway, gives the full name of the author. Then she talks about the article. She lists the article, and she gives me the full name of the article. It's also in quotations, and the full name of the writer, right? So there's no abbreviations, no anything. Perfect. The second thing she does really well in this thesis is the topic of feminism and masculinity is present in both pieces. She gives me the topic, right? The topic that these two are going to talk about is feminism and masculinity. Ironically, it's the topic of the unit that we were covering, but spoiler alert, I did read this before. Reread this before. She does talk about feminism and masculinity in this essay. So that's really good that she actually put those things together. You're going to want to do the topic. This shows me that she did the rhetorical situation. She really did her due diligence. She went through Hills Like White Elephants and went through all 5 steps. Now, granted, Hills Like White Elephants is something that in this particular semester where this was written, we did this in the later part of the semester. So by then she was able to do rhetorical situation quickly, almost in her sleep. And so she was able to pick off topics very, very quickly and just chose a topic to talk about as far as the steps of the rhetorical situation. So that's what you kind of want to aim for by doing this, by showing this or writing this. She's showing me, hey, I did the rhetorical situation and I'm going to talk about this topic, right? And so because she chose this topic, she was able to choose an article from the databases that talks about her topic. See how they kind of link together? Now, here's what I wish she would have done better. The rest of this tells me, or the rest of this thesis is leaning towards a compare and contrast, as if she is comparing and contrasting the story in the article, which you should never do ever in the history of the world, ever. But she doesn't. So it was a weird thing to reconcile that the thesis is saying that, oh, I'm going to compare and contrast these things, but the piece doesn't. So that leads me to believe that she understood what the assignment was, but didn't quite find a way to finish off the thesis. So right here, this part is where the argument goes. So if you were to say, in Hills Like White Elephants and She's 19, written by this person, the topic of feminism and masculinity means that feminism will die out soon, or masculinity will die out soon, or in a perfect world, there's no room for either. Whatever the argument could be, right? It's up to you to tell me what you think the argument is. I don't tell you. That's why we have the rhetorical situation, and I'm teaching that to you, right? So that is what I wish you would have done better here. But not bad. Not bad at all. So let's keep going. So we have the first body paragraph here. And I want to count the other body paragraph, which is right here. And then she has the ending. So she's got 2 body paragraphs, an intro and a conclusion. So she's got 4 paragraphs, which is perfectly fine. There are plus and minuses to it, and we'll for sure talk about it as we go through this. But for sure, it's interesting to point this out because she's doing a specific thing here. So let's start with the first body paragraph. And it starts with "Hills Like White Elephants" tells the story of a girl later named Jig, and of a male American in Spain discussing the topic of abortion. At the time of the publication of the story in 1927, women still struggled to gain equality even though the 19th Amendment was ratified 7 years prior. Throughout the story, Jig is referred to as a woman, as a girl and not a woman. All right, so I'm going to stop here. I'm actually going to stop right here, right before the word "throughout." I want you to notice that she gave me a summary. She did this really, really well. I think this led to her really good grade. She gave me a summary of the story, and I need a summary, but I don't want a long summary. Don't give me a paragraph of summary. A paragraph of summary is not going to do it. It's not going to do it. She gave me a line. 1 sentence. The very first one. Is this a story about Jig and an American man in Spain, and they're discussing the topic of abortion? Yes, she could have talked about there's this strain, and then they have 45 minutes to decide this, and da 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 da. All right, so all of that could have gone there, but she really just boiled it down essentially to what the story is about. Woman, man, abortion. Done. Okay, so that's the first sentence. The second sentence here gives me a little bit of the context. Another way that I know she's done the rhetorical situation, because she's giving me 1 line of context here. She's not giving me a book report of 1927 and women's liberation and the right to vote and she's not giving me that. She's giving me saying, hey, at the time of this is what was going on. So we need to keep this in mind as we are analyzing this story. It's essentially what she's saying. And that's what context is. What is going on? What is the writer having a conversation with in the piece? Because remember, things don't just appear or are written in a vacuum. There are things that are in play. If there is a march, if there is a sickness, if there is a pandemic, if there is an election, if there is not an election, if there is women getting the right to vote, women losing the right to vote, whatever it is. The fact that there's a worldwide ban on gummy bears, whatever the topic could be, right? The context could be they're having a conversation with that context here. So she does this beautifully and brilliantly in 2 sentences. This is what you should aim for. This is what she did really well here. Now she's going to talk about the rest of the thing. So throughout the story, this is what's going on. The word girl weakens what Jig is. The American is referred to as a man, which goes to show that in this time, the men were superior to women. The entire plot of the story consisted of Jig and the American figuring out what to do for the rest of their lives, basically, within the span of 40 minutes. After reading the story, it was clear to me that Jig was fighting with herself. Jig had no idea what to do, especially since she was fully dependent on the American. Fantastic. So, some people would say that this is a rest of the summary. It's not a rest of the summary. She's actually doing a little bit of analyzing. She's actually analyzing the word choice, the diction here in this particular story, and talking about how this is kind of an example of how the author is talking about the superiority of men. So she's going back to masculinity and feminism, right? So she's starting to put her argument here. Now, here's what I wish she would have done more of. this. I wish she would have given me a little bit more analysis here. She really only gave me like 3 sentences of analysis, although it's really good, well put together sentences. Don't get me wrong. But I wish there was more sentences here of analyzing this piece to show me that she really did think about this, right? And then this last 2 lines is kind of her thoughts about it. And I wish she gave me a little bit more of that as well. Maybe another 2 more sentences about how what she was analyzing ties back to the topic and the argument she thinks this piece is making. If she would have done that, that would have just really bolstered and put more meat on the bones of this paragraph. Okay? So let's look at this paragraph here. And you'll see that she is doing the same thing, right? She is doing the same pattern. And let me write this down. This won't be in your sample. I'm just writing this down for you guys. So she did in the first body paragraph 2 sentences of summary with intro of story, right? Then she did a couple of sentences of analysis, right? And that could include, like, she could use any elements. In this case, elements of fiction is what she used. She could talk about part of the rhetorical situation. Whatever she chooses to talk about, it depends on what you say the argument is. So after she does this, she does that. Then she ties it back a couple of sentences of her thoughts. All right, so this is what she's doing, right? This is the pattern of her body paragraphs. So we just know that from the first body paragraph. Spoiler alert, this is what she's doing in the second one as well. So she has 2 body paragraphs that are doing these things, these 3 things, right? And they're not long paragraphs, but the length is not as important as what the sentences are doing. You want to explain enough to get me to understand that you know what you're talking about. Again, I'm your audience, right? I'm the one giving you the grade. You're the one that has to tell me, you know what? I do understand this story, or I do understand this essay, and I did break this down, and this is the argument that they're making. And like, no ifs, ands, or buts. I am concrete correct on this. You need to tell me this in this essay. I don't need to tell you this. I'm giving you the tools. I want to see you use them. All right. So let's look at the second body paragraph. And she's 19 and lives with her mother. Meet the feminist teenager running for office in Argentina, Ofelia Fernandez. And I want you to notice here that she is talking, she like labels who we're talking about from the article. So she holds no punches here. Ofelia Fernandez appears as an educated 19-year-old who has achieved many goals. Ofelia has been elected the youngest ever student body president of her prestigious Buenos Aires school. Now, this right here is the summary. See how short it is? Again, it's 2-sentence summary. She gets straight to the point. Now, she gives me some context, right? At the time this article was published, Ofelia was a few days away from possibly being elected as the youngest lawmaker in Latin America. Boom. There's no analysis. Let me add this here. I'm sorry. 2 sentences. Analysis. Let's see. Context. She put some context here. So there's no analysis of this particular piece because it's a news piece. News pieces don't need to be analyzed because they're fact. So you don't really analyze fact in that way. So there's no reason to analyze it. So she goes straight to her thoughts. and how this plays back into the grander scheme of her topic and her argument. Me, being the same age and gender, it is amazing to see the progress that women have made throughout time and continue to do incredible things across the world. Ophelia was the voice to thousands of teenage girls who fought for the abortion bill on the streets. The fact that the girl of such young age going out into the world and fighting for women in our country is something empowering for other girls, and I think that it is something that should be seen more often. Wow, that is a long sentence. Many countries around the world are governed by male individuals, and only a few, such as Taiwan and New Zealand, are governed by women. So she is talking about women's right to choose, and she's talking about women's right to choose here in the first paragraph. Her not analysis, but her coming back to the thesis, or coming back to the topic or the argument, which is what she is doing here. She's tying it back. This is done really, really well. I just wish she tied it a little bit more to the story. I'm always going to want more, right? A little bit more to the story. And I think she would have had it right on point. Again, there's some issues here with grammar and with usage and whatnot. And there's some issues here with MLA. So because you are using news sources, would be nice if you actually used MLA to cite your sources, and you should, and you will. So right here we have her putting the in-text citations inside the quotation marks, and you don't need that there. You need it outside of the quotation marks and before the period. So you want it right there. Okay. Same thing with here. Sanchez wrote this. So you want this in-text citation, or parenthetical documentation is what it used to be called. A long word just to say everything's inside of parentheses. So you're going to take this parenthetical documentation, or your in-text citation, and you're going to move it outside of your quotations, and you're going to close it with a period or whatever punctuation mark is there. I personally, there's two ways of doing in-text citations. One way is to put the actual citation right next to the information that's being cited, no matter where it is in the sentence. And the other way of doing it is putting it at the end of the sentence, where the citation is happening. I am of the school that your citation, your in-text citation, needs to be at the end of the sentence. That's just me. I think it just keeps it beautiful and neat. It's an aesthetic thing, really. I just think it's nicer and it makes more sense. But anyway, I'm moving on. I'm digressing. So we get to the conclusion here. And the conclusion says, after reading both pieces of text, most of my questions revolved around hills like white elephants. One of my main questions is a commonly asked question, which is what did Jeg choose to do? If Jeg was a real person, she lived with us now, she would think about the rights that women have in 2020. All right. So obviously issues with some grammar things and with usage and with making sure the words are in the right position and whatnot. But what she does really, really well here is that she ends with asking questions. A common question is, what would Jeg do if she lived right now? What did she actually choose to do? Because at the end of the story, there is no concrete evidence that she decided to do the thing or not do the thing, right? So she's asking these questions. So it's good. What I wish you would have done better is that I wish she would have added more of her thoughts here and concluded it properly. And then it would have been fantastic. This paper actually isn't too bad. Minus, of course, grammar issues, which you will get dinged for if you do, right? It is well thought, it's well put together. Am I going to want more? Yeah, I'm always going to want more. I'm the professor. But I want you to say what you mean and mean what you say and write what exactly you meant. And this is what this piece does really, really well. Because oftentimes students and young writers write things and they just throw words up on the screen like there was spaghetti on a wall to see which one's gonna stick. She didn't do that. She literally wrote what she meant. And I know that she did that because look at how elegant her first two sentences of both of these paragraphs are. How elegant and how to the point her summary sections were. So I know that she chose her words and she thought about things carefully. And this is essentially, at the end of the day, I want to see you think on paper, right? So here's another look at this. So this is what the body paragraphs looks like, and body usually gives people the most work. So that's why I'm kind of breaking this down. The body paragraphs, you have about 2 sentences of summary with an intro to the story. And by intro, I mean like right? That's what I mean. The name of the story, the piece with the author's last name. You're going to want to give a couple of sentences of context. And we talked about earlier what that is. Then you're going to want a couple of sentences of analysis. If you're actually doing the piece that we read for class, you're going to definitely want to use maybe one of the elements, whether it's the elements of argument or the elements of fiction or poetry, depending on what we read. And you could use that to help do your analysis, or you can use part of the rhetorical situation. Maybe audience is important for this piece, and it's important to talk about the audience because you're arguing about something, and in order to argue the thesis, you need to talk about audience, right? So you can use audience. It's perfectly fine. It's up to you. It really depends on what you think the argument is. And then a couple of sentences of your thoughts. You want to tie it back to the argument that you had in your thesis, and how that ties in together. And then you're done with that paragraph. So I hope this is helpful. I want to point out one more thing, however. Let's point out here how she does this. That she does in the second paragraph. She does, kind of, sort of. All right, so let's do it here. So say that you want to talk about something that the author did, right? The author here for Heels Like White Elephants is Ernest Hemingway. You've already mentioned his name right here, his full name here, and you mentioned it in the thesis, which is probably the best place to put it, frankly. So after you've already mentioned the author, the full name of the author, all you have to do is mention the last name from then on. So if she wanted to say, in Heels Like White Elephants, comma, Hemingway tells the story, right, of the girl later named Jig. She literally could have just put Hemingway's name because she's referring to the author. So every time you're referring to the author, you can just use the author's last name and you'll be fine. Okay, I hope this is helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. Bye, guys.